and welcome to another Why Press Play. This time we're talking about Metropolitan from 1990, and with us in studio we have the one and only Nazi warrior himself, radio producer, former comedian, and all around, I think, a Dublin debutante, Gareth Stack.
I will fight you on the beaches, I will fight you on the water, I will fight you on the microphone, Gordon.
He's a hot Dubliner, is what he is. And,
I wish.
You're very welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, sir.
I do like your I think fanciful taste in movies. I asked him to pick a couple of movies, and he's all like, "Oh yes, there's this a Korean silent movie that you know."
You put the kibosh on the really edgy stuff.
Yeah, I think some people aren't able for it yet. But Metropolitan, I think, like when I started watching, I was like, "This is a bit shit." Like all the movies that we have on this show, it began as moderately shite, and there are really, really nice little kind of appealing pieces to it. The way the mistakes are almost as endearing as the successes, and the characters at the start it's kind of all one amorphous blob of privilege and white elitism, and then eventually, like, they all separate into their own characters, like some kind of a posh Power Ranger.
That's how I've always described myself.
Yeah,
amorphous blob of privilege and white elitism.
Yeah, that's going to be on your headstone. Yeah, so I mean, like on White Press Play, we try to find the movies that you can watch, so you spend less time choosing and more time actually watching the fucking things. We've gone through a lot of stuff now from like 80s and 90s horror, some old science fiction movies, some dramas that you might overlook. And Metropolitan, where it wouldn't be my first choice for a movie, definitely. This is like one of the epitomizing choices for the theme or the purpose of this show, because I would look at that and go, fuck that bullshit. I would never watch this in my days. So how did you come across this movie?
That's a good question. I've no idea.
You have no idea.
I've no answer.
It's
to
one
that
of those.
question.
It's not like a you know, your mates are just around. And it's like film students. It seems like something film students would watch as an example of like a first movie. You know, it was nominated for like literally dozens of awards, and it got an Oscar nomination for its screenplay.
Yeah, I grew up loving Woody Allen movies.
Yeah,
and I think when you're into that kind of verbal, witty, situation comedy, whatever kind of what's the term for it, kind of a drawing room piece, yeah, then there's nothing else for you. What are you going to watch? You watch your Woody Allen, and then there's nothing. And then I guess I came across this movie, and it's sort of like all of the most extreme aspects of Woody Allen, right? The intellectualism, the pretension, the characters who are unself-aware and kind of amusingly so, and incredibly witty.
Yeah,
and it's turned up to 11. And so for me, it's
almost a farce.
Yeah,
some of them are like some of the Woody Allen movies are kind of like a traditional paradigm of cinema that's like farcified or farcical, you know, which is easier to consume than something like this, where Whit Stilman will come in and he wrote it himself, he directed it himself, and because he wrote and directed it, it's kind of all from his point of view, the same way as Woody Allen would do. But this guy wasn't, I don't think, like a proper like super film student type. He wasn't like a movie buff, whereas Woody Allen he's the film student or whatever. He's the director's director. And
I think Whit Stilman would disagree with you, but I think you're right. I think he doesn't have the technical acumen of somebody like Woody Allen. Yeah. Woody Allen can turn around tomorrow and he could be like, I want to make a Western, and he would know exactly how to do it. It would be easy for him
because he studied that stuff and he knows the mechanics and how it works. Like his new one, Blue Velvet, was that it?
Blue Jasmine.
Blue Jasmine, that's the one. Like that could stand next to any of those other modern films, whereas he's kind of put in as a 70s, early 80s kind of a director that is not able to mature or has fallen off, as they would say. Like he's well able to swing with the modern dudes and the Apatows and whatever that Blue Jasmine was, and it still had that inimitable like Woody Allen fucking dreary misery about it. Like, but Whit Stillman came out of the gates here with nothing.
It's a movie that is more like a Jane Austen novel. And I don't mean like an adaptation of a Jane Austen novel. It's like literally if somebody gave Jane Austen a director's chair, got a few of her mates and stuck her in front of a camera, make a movie Jane Austen, and here's what you pay. So it's on first viewing, I can see how you might have that reaction, like, what the hell am I watching? This is, you know, pictures of people talking as the old kind of insult for movies which didn't have a lot of crazy cinematography. but it has a charm which is unique.
Yes.
And in a way, it's much more charming than any Woody Allen movie because they're always quite cynical in a different way. And there's a darkness that you pointed out there about his view of the world that isn't here. This is a charmingly reactionary film.
Yeah, it seems like it's something that he lived with at a certain point in his life, or is from a personal experience. It did take him 4 years to write, between 1984 and 1988. It was made in 89 and released in 1990. Like, this was the time of the white New York elites. This was Reagan's time. It was definitely a movie of the moment, and which I think makes it have that much more cultural significance, and why probably your mates who may be film students or at least art students have been exposed to this, and that's maybe where you got it from, you know?
Yeah, I think like even at the time it was released, it was a very retro film. Like, it's not set in the 80s. It's set in this like nebulous, somewhere between the 50s and the 80s, and they would have made it earlier more visually, but they didn't have the money.
Yeah.
So instead,
it says that there's these little what are they, like talkie, the talkie movies, Charlie Chaplin cards.
Yeah.
It says like sometime New York City, Manhattan,
which is taken right from Woody Allen. Woody Allen does that in a bunch
Very
of his
much
movies,
so, yeah.
and the music is very Woody Allen as well. But so I think he's the kind of guy who would have hated the 80s and the new money in Manhattan in the 80s. Sure, yeah, it's quite new money and all that stuff, but it's not the culture he's talking about. Is the old elite New York people who would have despised your Trumps and your Thatcherite loads of money characters. These kind of people who consider themselves very cultured. They call themselves in the film the urban haute bourgeoisie, which is ludicrous. But what they get, I guess, that they're not aristocrats, but they're the elite, the traditional old Rockefeller style, like snobby money, or the children of that. And they live in their own world where everyone is the same age as them. They're all like 16 to 20, and they're all going to these little debutante balls and having their high tea and doing mescaline and shit like that.
That's the thing. It does seem like very much removed from anything I've ever experienced, which is a nice window into how it goes on. I could only imagine that that's how it was. I have no reason to believe it wasn't. So therefore, movie magic, people. But the way that it was presented to me was like, here's a movie, and it's like, it's cool. It's like you said, it's like, it's like, it's cool. It's like an art thing. It's kind of something about Christmas. It's set around Christmas time, because they go to all of these debutante balls at Christmas time. So like, it's cool. It's cool. Check it out. And I'm watching it like for the first 15 minutes. I'm like, this is like somebody's fucking home movies, man. This is, everything's at eye level. Everyone is in at the same time. It kind of has that a play that got turned into a movie, or you can see the script. I said that about the movie Calgary, starring Brendan Gleeson, and it's about a priest who's faced with a murderer in the west of Ireland.
Marvelous film,
really, really good. But when I watched that film, I was looking at that going, I can see the script. I can see the whole script. People were saying stuff. It didn't sound natural. There was like little quips and stuff like that.
But that's not a naturalistic. It's not meant to be natural.
But there's parts of it that really are, and then it breaks that. And I know it is purposefully broken.
Yeah. But I've heard this criticism of that film, and I think it's like they're totally not getting the film. Going off on one, but Calgary is set in a very heightened world. Calgary is a strange, dreamlike film, much more so than this film. But this has a little bit of that. This is not the real world. We're watching the world that I think Whit Stilman would like to have been in. Yeah. When he was maybe a kid, or when he was graduating school, and probably knew people who were vaguely like this. And this is like his imagined Jane Austen style. Wouldn't it be lovely if these kind of people existed?
Kind of manufactured world. But the director for Calgary, like John Michael McDonough, who's making a movie not dissimilar to this kind of theme, which is like that exaggerated, definitely manufactured world, all based on these global stereotypes that are presumed of those people. So it's like a bunch of country Irish people, a farmer, a young confirmed bachelor who's a bit unhinged, a fat priest who's like wise with the world, but he got put out on this craggy island away from everybody. And that whole thing with John Michael McDonough's like brain, he's real like modern sharp guy, like, and I can see him writing that going, that's a real cool thing to say, and not having like purposefully putting in a stupid line that sounds like something that a Lethal Weapon a bad guy would say walking away from a dead body, and you're like, that doesn't match with this style. And this movie Metropolitan, I think, is full of those kind of things. There's Nick Smith, who's played by Chris Eigeman, one of the main characters, and kind of I think the boy you love to hate. There's some of the stuff that he says, like, you're like, Jesus man, that's really odd. It's odd to come out of somebody from your caliber or your stature in society. There's another guy, Charlie Black, played by Taylor Nichols, who's like this a naysaying, doomsaying, societal commentator who's predicting the downfall of the bourgeoisie, and some of the stuff that he's saying is like hyper self-aware, almost to the point of like self-criticism, or even like white guilt, which at the time I guess he was speaking for that part of society. So you can see the building blocks that Stillman was putting together to go, like, I want this to be a nice and balanced cast with something to say.
They are precocious.
Yes.
Every single character
has something different. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a criticism that can be made, which is that they are all kind of spouting the witticisms of the writer.
Yeah.
But for me,
you can see the script, Gareth.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, and it's like all the characters. That, though.
It's like a play.
It's like an Oscar Wilde play.
Yeah.
It's the characters aren't there to represent real people. They're there to give voice to this kind of witty dialogue and create this lovely little world, which is at times cynical and ironic and all the rest. And if you look at it from that point of view, then it succeeds. If you look at it like a film trying to portray real people, it's like an alien came to Earth and tried to make a film about humans.
And that's where when I started watching, I was like, cool. About 7 minutes in, I was like, what fucking shit is this bullshit? And I even marked it on the thing at 13 minutes and 45 seconds. I stopped it and I went for a piss, and on the way back down the stairs I went, oh yeah, that's what it is. It's meant to be shite. Like, that's
okay. I just want to protest the use of the word shite. This isn't like Birdemic, this isn't clumsy filmmaking. It's just very simple filmmaking.
Exactly. And I think the style of the time. I think this is before. I mean, I know we had the Alien and we had a very big budget movies. Like, we haven't had our Lethal Weapon yet. We haven't had these like simply made, simply shot. Action or like character development movies where you're putting out these people that are like very much like real people, but they represent a section of society. It was more, here's a story, here's like one little story, and I'm going to expand that character out as much as I can. This was like an art film that got into the mainstream.
Yeah, and the descendants of this movie aren't your Lethal Weapons. They're your mumblecore movies. Yeah. Your Hannah Take the Stairs, your funny ha-ha. The stuff there's
one coming out more recently now with Aubrey Plaza in it, which is very much of this style.
You mean, what's it? Ingrid Goes West.
Yes, Ingrid Goes West is very much...
That's much more cinematic. I just saw that the other night.
It's made to be like that to appeal, but the character and how the story is told is very much like this.
Yeah, I think there's some commonality, but like this is anti-cinema. This is so... There's not a single scene. The most action-packed scenes are a couple of punches, which are delivered like willfully badly. Yeah. By an awkward team.
The punch sound. Right, so what I think we like to do on White Press Play before we go too deep is the 60-second plot. I'm going to tell you about some social stuff before that, and then we get in and Gareth is going to give us his best Dave Fanning describing the movie in 60 seconds. So if you want to talk about anything that we talk about on the show, or you want to get in on the social and have the chats yourself, you can email me at info@whitepressplay.com with anything you like. Just no genitals or whatever, because the current climate or what have you. If you wanted to get in touch with me or other people who enjoy the show, or just people who like movies, get onto Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. We have an Instagram. We also have a Reddit r/whitepressplay. And all the stuff, all the links for all of these movies and any little reviews and stuff that I can find online are ones that I do myself. I'm going to throw them up there. And we also have a Discord server where we can go hang out and talk about movies or computer games or TV shows. We also have a Twitch channel where I will be playing PlayStation, Steam and Nintendo and Mega Drive games, streaming them through Twitch, so you can join in, watch along, play along yourself. Even if you have a PS ID, you can send it to me in an email and I'll add you to my group. And all of those things can be seen in their exclusivity on a lifeblood of the show at patreon.com. So patreon.com/ypressplay will get you exclusive behind the scenes videos and clips, outtakes from the shows, get you early access into different videos and certain live chats we do when we get together and all watch a movie together and have the chats about it. Patreon.com/ypressplay. You can start from $2 a month. and it donates to the show. It keeps the lights on around here and keeps tea in the mugs and sandwiches in the belly. So if you're feeling generous and you like the show, give it a shout there. We also have a sister podcast, Those Conspiracy Guys. I guess if you're listening to this, you've probably heard that. If this is your first dalliance with me and my voice, I have a conspiracy show where we talk about politics, society, culture, and pedophiles and ghosts and werewolves and aliens and shit like that. So you can get over to thoseconspiracyguys.com and check out all the crack over there. Subscribe to this on your podcast app. We are on everything, basically. If you're on Apple right now and having trouble with your podcast app like I am, my phone is like a hobo stove in my pocket. Whenever I turn on the podcast app, it hates my battery. So there are other apps like Leela, Overcast, Podcast Addict, Castbox, any of those ones. So if you aren't on iTunes but you do have an iTunes account, the whole reason for giving you those other apps is if you go into iTunes and leave us a review, be it however many stars you want, leave us a review, leave us a rating. It drives us up in the charts. It makes iTunes feel better. I don't really mind, but it will help out the show if you should so wish. So we're going to get back into it with Gareth's 60-second synopsis of the movie.
Can I just say, based on your blurb there, I just love the idea of a squad that hunts aliens, ghosts, werewolves, and also pedophiles.
Yeah,
there's a show.
It would be effective because, you're not hunting like a werewolf 5 days a week. It could just be 1 day a week. So you just have to diversify. Get out there.
Every fifth episode
Monday.
of the show, it's it's a monster of the week, and this week's monster, it's Joseph Fritzl. He's escaped from jail. He's at it. The tone really shifted this episode.
They pull the mask off him, and it's all like, oh, it's old man Fritzl.
And I would have done it too if not for that damn daughter.
Yeah, I'm just my head is full of BBC paedophiles at the moment because I'm studying for the Jimmy
I've been climbing in your ear to escape the Operation U-Tree.
The Jimmy Savile episode right now.
You'll be safe behind his eyes.
Oh man, it's you don't want to be doing it last thing at night is all I'm saying to you. Really, it's hardcore.
It's hard to sleep with a horn.
It's fucking hell. It's probably already been released by the time this show goes out, but go and check it out. It's Jimmy Savile and the BBC paedophiles, and a bit of Pizzagate and a bit of Elsagate and a bit of all of these.
That Elsagate thing is weird.
I did a little bit of it at our live show.
Oh my god! I just came across that
the audience
myself recently.
Like, fuck.
That's not some of those. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned this to me before when we were talking before a show, like about the the crazy stuff on YouTube, and then recently I came across a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm like, there is something really strange.
Just actually video the child abuse online. And people are putting it out.
And stuff that, as you said, it's not directly illegal, but it is really tonally off. There are kids being filmed weekly by their own families, or sometimes by some mysterious people that probably aren't their family, and they're not doing anything explicit, but there is some creepy vibe to that shit. It's very much. It's not right.
So before we get too dark, before we go too crazy, we're going to go to Gareth with the 60-second plot. You can spoil it if you like. I don't think there's many spoilers in this. It's more like no. But you can give us the 60 seconds. Starting from the start, there is love stories. There is violence. There's social exclusion, and obviously white elitism. So here's the 60-second plot from Gareth, and your time starts now.
So young Tom Townsend is leaving the first debutante ball of the season. Somehow he's rented a tuxedo. He's managed to get himself to this ball, but he doesn't know anybody. As he's leaving, a group known as the Sally Fowler Rat Pack, another group of young privileged white people, as Gordo pointed out, pick him up in their taxi, bring him along to an after party, and he gets in with them. So the film just follows their quote-unquote adventures as they banter back and forth at a series of after parties in different Upper West Side apartments, and condescend to Tom, who is a poor Upper East Side boy from a family of wealth, but they've lost that money. And so nothing really happens. It's just wit, wisdom, entertainment, Jane Austen, Jeeves and Wooster style stuff. There's a little bit of violence as the wicked Rick von Sloniker tries to steal some women from the group, and they are ultimately, there's a big conclusion where they go to the Hamptons, and a big conclusion in this movie. It's like the smallest conclusion in the film. If you like witty banter, that's your movie.
Time up. That was one of the that was one of the best 60s. Oh, fucking, he timed it, this cunt. That's fucking brilliant.
I said, I had my notes. I didn't look at them once.
Love it. I love it. Freeballed it. That was one of the best ones ever. But it's not that hard of a movie, but not taken away from your excellent
given that nothing happens in the movie, it's pretty easy to summarize.
Exactly. It's like talking about a fucking episode of Seinfeld. So, you talked about Tom Townsend, Unfortunately, ginger gentleman.
Like yourself.
Well, I mean, I've brown hair, a ginger beard, black chest hair, and snow white pubes.
You're a miasma. What's it? A griffin?
I think it's called a piebald. But so he's leaving a debutante ball.
Yeah.
Now, as far as I can understand, a debutante ball is something that, and I haven't looked this up, now this is my own presumption, is something that the rich kids of rich parents do when they come home for their Christmas holidays, where they have these little we're going to a ball over at the Dorchester's mansion, where there's like different hotels and stuff all over town where they would have debutante balls, and certain colleges then would host those events, and you know, at the end of the movie they're talking about like, oh, here's one in one of the famous New York hotels, and it's actually being televised and stuff like that. So is that like
well back in the day, like, you know, hundreds of years ago, 18th, 17th century, what a debutante ball was when
to get them to meet and ride.
Well, it was when a young woman was introduced to society, so they'd hit 16 or 17 or whatever it was, and the debutante ball is their first ball.
Her blooding.
Right. Jesus,
that's what they call it.
So these are aristocrats, and like, it's literally introducing them to the high society. So they're not expected to marry anyone immediately. It is putting them on the market, so to speak, though. And now then, at the time this is kind of set 50s, 60s in New York, it was a replication of that. So just rich people letting their kids have fun in tuxes and stuff, because all the stuff about selling your daughter had pretty much gone away by that point. But
they still wanted to be able to go and have a party, but have some element of decorum, so that you don't end up with like a Paris Hilton type who's out fucking sucking a yard of rod.
It's also more than that. It's like, it's introducing them into the world of high society, where all your influence and power comes from. And we were talking earlier about Bill Gates' mum got him that contract with IBM by having a chat with someone who was on her board of some charity. That's where this stuff is happening. People are getting introduced to the right people,
like a bourgeoisie inculcation.
Literally, it's it's an initiation ceremony.
Yeah, right. And it's more female focused. So like the Rose of Tralee in Ireland, you have these beautiful women in their I think cocktail dresses. There's a certain special name on the dresses, and they'd land in, but they'd have to have an escort, and the escort was invariably somebody else from high society, and they'd probably pair up or whatever. Mm-hmm. And Tom Townsend was tasked with, because of his family's, you know, previous wealth, he was tasked with being the arm candy for one of the girls in the group. And as he was leaving, as you said, they pull up in a taxi. They're going to one of these after parties in one of these beautiful New York high society houses, where they'd all just basically just sit around and smoke long cigarettes and have like a gin and tonic and pretend to talk like Daddy does, you know, leaning over the fireplace into the fire going, oh, the stock market, eh, Bonnie?
And even in the world of the movie, they're very self-consciously out of date. They're anachronistic. They're looking backwards in time. Even in this kind of 50s-esque kind of movie, they're old-fashioned. They're trying to be like maybe the 30s or something. You know, before they're constantly running up against a world which is sort of like not for them. You know.
Yeah, the movie opens basically with the star of the show. I think at the start of the movie, Carolyn Farina, who plays Audrey. And she's trying on a wedding dress that's too big for her, and this is the kind of the allusion to what Gareth said, which is like, you know, the marrying off of these young girls into high society. Now Audrey goes through a kind of an internal turmoil. Where, does she want to be included in that life? Does she want to even live in New York? And we see before the end that she's like, yeah, I'm out of here, man, I'm going to France. Like she's already checked out before she's checked in. And she has a kind of a turmoil or a tumultuous decision to make, like, and during this winter season of parties and after parties and getting to know, because all we see of the movie is the after parties, one after the other over a winter season, and she basically cements her decision to not take part in this bourgeoisie kind of high society lifestyle. And when we get introduced to the party proper, when we get into the house, the set dressings and all of the furnitures and even the bound books and stuff in the background, the tuxedos, even the glasses are all very much on point and bang on trend for that style.
Yeah.
And Whit Stillman called in a lot of favors.
Yeah, lots made of how cheap this movie was.
Yeah.
First of all, it's not that cheap. It was 210 grand in 1990, which is a lot of money back then.
And it made 3 million,
and it
which
made
is
3
a lot
million,
of
which
money.
is a lot. But he was from this preppy class.
Yes.
He was able to go, oh, Jonathan, could we possibly use your place on the Upper East Side? Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's not the kind of access that normal humans have.
There was 12 different buildings and sets used,
including the Plaza Hotel, which they somehow got permission to use.
and he said in an interview, I was watching an interview and today, he said, like, in the Plaza we didn't get permission. They were hiding around with cameras, and they had cameras covered over, like there were bird cages and shit like
That's
that.
great.
And they were communicating with walkie-talkies, going like, "Okay, walk around the corner, count to 3 and walk around." 3.
That's why
2,
all the shots are like, they look like they're done in a broom closet.
So you're hiding you're hiding behind something, you know.
Yeah.
So the houses themselves were already set like this. They're already dressed like this. This is like as authentic as you could possibly get.
Yeah.
These were all, you know, furnished in the early to mid 80s. You know, it's been filmed in 1989, so it's like right on the fucking money. It could have been even furnished in the 70s, you know, and all that stuff. They were in like the drawing rooms,
most of which have like, you know, 17th century French furniture and chaise lounge and all this sort of stuff. Yeah.
So they're all hanging around on this mad furniture, smoking long cigarettes, and basically just talking about the state of society. Not so much focused on themselves as young people are wont to do, you know, talking about their internal politics for the first half of the movie, which is where I'm watching for the first 20 minutes going like, who are they? Why are they important? And what the fuck are they talking about? And what authority have they got to talk about it? And then it started getting into the personal aspects of it, telling the backstories of them, and then you're like, oh, that's what the fuck is going on.
That's what I love about this movie, is that it's about people having interesting conversations. And most movies, the way movies are made now, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it leaves so little time and space for dialogue that even where the dialogue is very witty, it's a quip.
Yes.
These people have, like, when you try and quote from this movie,
Diplomatic immunity revoked.
Yeah, exactly. Or even, you know, I'm not even talking about an action movie, but
Stick around.
Even an quote unquote intellectual movie, the dialogue is so back and forth that this movie, when you try and quote from it, it's very difficult because the quotes are 6 lines long. But the payoffs of those jokes, I just want to point out, we haven't said this, I think that this is one of the funniest films ever. Every time I watch it, I fall on the floor laughing, and maybe that's just my style of humour.
I think it very much could be.
Hand on heart, I did grow up reading a lot of Edwardian British comedy.
Okay, well, it's not fall on the floor laughing for me, but I'm watching it going, you know, the way you'd appreciate a joke by going, oh yeah, that's good.
I just think it's so caustic, and it's every joke is triple tagged. Like there's never just one punchline. There's a punchline and a punchline and a punchline, and
a lot of the jokes in the first 20 minutes the whole first 20 minutes of the movie will make you want to switch it off, I have to say. Right, it's like when you're getting the tip in before the good stuff starts, you're just like, this is fucking. But if you're watching and paying attention, all of those things that are said, like we have Charlie, who's basically like a mad naysayer. He's going, oh, you know, like downward mobility is an inevitability, and the bourgeoisie class. He's always trying to self-analyze and stuff like that. So those things that he's saying as the movie goes along end up like becoming prophecy, and end up becoming like, getting more extrapolated and getting more explicit in the cases that you're talking about. So he's talking in general in the first act. In the second act, when we're talking about the personalities between people, you get to see like the families, like the Rick, who's the Slick Rick, the rapist. His whole backstory ends up being like a mirror of what Charlie has described, and then the last part of it is their downfall, their downward mobility. So it just seems like, you say it is multi-layered. And there was a reason it got the Oscar nomination for the screenplay, because the screenplay is fucking great. Now, it could have had better actors, it could have been filmed better, it could have been... But it wouldn't be the same movie though, and I do get that. It could be made in a modern way,
but it's also
it'll end up looking like something like Clerks or something.
It has. I think the look suits the script, but it's a wish fulfillment fantasy for a certain kind of person. The kind of person that goes to a party and just sits there really pissed off that there's nobody fun to talk to, because everybody's on yokes. I think that we're so unused to seeing that, unless maybe an Oscar Wilde play is like the only place you're going to see this kind of dialogue. It's so sharp. There's not a line of filler. Every single line is like witty and clever, and not in a sense
has an answer.
And not like a reference to something you haven't heard of. You can watch this movie and never have read any kind of, it's not like they're constantly making references to great literature. They're making really funny jokes that are pretentious, but not in that way. There's clever jokes, and that just
a lot
warms
of
my heart.
Wordplay,
so much wordplay, so much like so much of the humor is about these characters don't realize how they're like 16 and they're so pretentious and they have no idea, and it's humor at their expense, but which is very fond of their aspirations to be like good people or to be intellectuals or to be like high class or
good for the world.
Yeah,
I think it's so funny that they're having this conversation about downward mobility, which is their greatest fear. You know, these kids who don't know their arse from a hole in the wall, who are fucking rich beyond their wildest dreams, and they don't know of anything else. But they're saying like downward mobility is inevitable, while they're all standing around in bought tuxes because renting a tux is so, you know,
day class A.
Yeah, and you know, Tom is sitting there in a rented tux with a shitty like winter coat, and they're kind of going, "Is that your coat, Townsend?" Like he's a bit like
he keeps saying, "It has a lining. It has a lining."
You must be freezing. And at one point, all getting up to take part in the cha-cha-cha. Like they put on a record and they start cha-cha-cha. And I'm like, that's this bullshit. But I did very much identify with the sitting around and talking about life and trying to figure yourself out, and especially the stuff that Charlie does. Yeah. Because he's kind of like the grounding voice of reason. And it seems like if they were all, you know, born in my town at my time and my age, those guys would have all just been sitting around smoking, passing the joint around, talking about their own life and going like, how can we keep the good stuff and get rid of the bad stuff, which is what everybody wants to do. But one thing that I thought was funny, and this is, like, we can get into quotes. I'm sure you have a ball of quotes there that you can throw out, but one of my favourite ones was, artists are an easier class to be because there's no way to measure failure as an artist.
Right,
you know,
right.
Because it's so subjective. And he's like, the girl, I think Annie said it, she's like going, all the people that are artists, you know, it's easier to be that because, you know, if you're a stockbroker, you have to make money, but if you're an artist, you can be good, you can be shite and nobody knows, like everyone says it's good. It's real kind of biting and like a commentary on how her friends are kind of bailing out, but yet not, like they're rich and they're kept, and they take part in this whole artistic world that's so subjective, and they all just like lick each other's hole. Very much kind of self-aware and self-deprecating. And I that was at the 13-minute mark, and I went, it's a piss take. Awesome.
It is, and it's also a callback to Hitchcock. Like this, people always remember Hitchcock from the big exciting sequences like North by Northwest, the plane chasing character. 90% of every Hitchcock movie is not that. It is people in drawing rooms. You know, it's Audrey Hepburn having a loquacious conversation. And if this movie had been made in 1950, like, I think it would have been a massive hit. So I think that's exactly what it is. It's just really, really old-fashioned verbal film, or 1940 even. And if it has a flaw, it's the flaw of being that kind of static movie. But all that stuff of self-aware, the characters gradually coming to a little bit of self-awareness, but I have such fondness for them because they're each in their own way. Like, even the villain Von Sloniker is such a toy box villain. He's so silly and absurd, and it's almost like a children's
film. He's a bad cunt
sense.
in that front room and that front room only. On the streets, like, he's toast. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and they're all kind of adorably geeky little kids, and
at the start, like I said, an amorphous kind of white elite blob, and then they start to delineate themselves very clearly. But the way that it's shot, it's very hard to follow the scenes, follow the different parties, follow the different nights and the timeline. And what I did notice, and I had to rewind it a few times to figure it out. So the way Stillman shot this film, and his DOP shot this film, he kind of left the reins over to the DOP to go like, okay, listen, you do like do you know the way in movie where you're supposed to do these like leading lines, and you're supposed to have these like follow shots where if somebody is looking out to the left, when you like cut or pan to the person who they're talking to, their eye lines have to meet, or else it looks kind of disjointed and amateurish. So you have to make sure that all the eye lines are correct, and or if somebody is leaving like to the screen right, you have to have something then, if that's where you want to draw the eye, when you cut to the next scene, that's where you want their eye to be, so the thing that's in the next scene has to be in that place. So it's just these like extra nice touches to filmmaking that the DOP I think really got to explore, and he really got to. It was a blank canvas, because Stillman was like, you fucking do you, man. I have absolutely no quarter about any of that stuff. Like, you can have your own whatever you want to do. And allegedly, Stillman used to have a copy of How to Direct a Movie, the book, on set with him always. So if someone asked him a question, he'd just be like, I'll be back in a moment. And he just goes over and he's like flicking through the book in the index, going like, how do you do that? Oh yeah, fuck, okay, hold on. Okay, cool. Yeah, so what you need to do, like, it was such a amateurish kind of production, but the way the movie was shot, very simple. And I figured out from watching it that there were times of great tension that have these harsh cuts, right? So from night to night to night, there aren't any transitions, there aren't any expositions of location, there aren't any median shots where you would go like, do you know, like in Friends when it goes from the cafe, it's all like bing bing bong bing bing bong bing, and it shows the outside of Central Park, and then it shows inside, and then when you move to Monica's apartment, it shows the outside of Monica's apartment, and then up into the balcony and then inside Monica's apartment, just to help that transition for the viewer to look in. It breaks the 180 rule loads of times. It has all of these little flaws in it that you wouldn't expect, and it disturbs you, I think, in the first little while when they're kind of all arguing. And it has these sharp cuts. The only thing you can tell the difference between shot to shot is that they're wearing different clothes. And some of them were even like photo negatively done. And I guarantee you that was the DOP going, okay, we need to make this thing, because it could have ended up like The Room. It could have ended up very like a verbose, like a long soliloquy of a movie that just doesn't end up making any sense. You know,
is an insane film that doesn't cohere. Like this could have been directed worse, but it certainly doesn't. It certainly makes sense. It's not confusing.
The script is really, really good, and that's the thing that it hangs on, right? But when they were changing from place to place to place, I'm sure in the script it's like interior, you know, another house in blah blah, blah. And on paper you look at that and go, yeah, that makes sense. But because they're changing from shot to shot,
are so similar
sets, such similar furniture. What they did was some of the guys were in black tuxedos, and then in the next shot they were wearing a white tuxedo jacket, and the girl was wearing a black dress, and now she's wearing like a gold dress. So they had these like changes of costume and changes of stance, like some lads standing up, and then the next scene he's sitting down wearing different clothes, to give that like strict cut and that feeling of, okay, we've moved on in time and location. And when it ended on a really nice note, it would like fade out to a black and then fade back up and have a whole second of black, and then fade back up to another kind of soft set with maybe one character in it, and then the scene got filled with other people. So it was these like very hard transitions of many people with many different distractions on the screen, to very easy transitions of scenes of one or two people having a moment, fade to black, come back up to one person, and the room gets full. That was all like cinematography 101 stuff that ended up, I think, pushing it towards an Oscar nomination. Like the script made that the way it was, so you had to follow it. Very simple movie making. There's no like mad crane shots. There's no like follow shots. There's no, you know, they're never in the car looking out, or it's super simple. Like you could do the whole thing on sticks, and I really, really like that simple, you know, way of making movies. Very small budget though, so you can't really. But
also they do a lot of things right that a lot of modern comedy movies don't. I mean, Harold Ramis said that comedy exists in the two shot. Yeah, and that is like an ironclad rule that is broken by every modern comedy, and as a result, it comes off with a certain unreal quality to the dialogue. Whereas this, even though the dialogue is ridiculous and so urbane and witty, because they're actually saying it to each other in the shot, it's a conversation that you can follow, and that is again, to me, it's like, it's very funny. I do like viscerally laugh watching this film, which I very rarely do. A lot of Harold Ramis movies I do as well.
It's a really personable film, and towards the end you get into the characters so much.
But
especially their relationships, and you know, their inadequacies, and their kind of awkward sexuality. That's kind of we'll talk about the relationships between them now in a sec. But
I think you can see the influence of, like, you look at something like Groundhog Day, obviously made later, but like those movies that Harold Ramis did, and John Landis as well. The way that comedy exists by having three people in a corner, and you know, in a situation, there's a definite influence there, and it works for me. It's
coming that Harold Ramis style, and those guys that he had in the movie, like Bill Murray and all of these guys, like that are early 90s or late 80s, early 90s comedies. That's all from stage to screen. So it's all from Saturday Night Live, it's all from improv, Second City stuff. And comedy doesn't lie in like being the funny part. It's like playing the straight thing. It's also like, you know, two dudes, and they're supposed to like, it's like, okay, we're in an improv scene, two guys are peeling potatoes, but one of you has slept with the other one's wife. Okay, go. The thing you absolutely don't do is talk about the potatoes. Do you know, that's the whole point. And Saturday Night Live training and how those sketches are written, like Anchorman, Blues Brothers, the Ghostbusters, like all of these movies are written from sketches or from ideas that were made in the preparations for writing the jokes and sketches for Saturday Night Live. And, Animal House and Fletch and all of these movies starring all those SNL guys. So the way this is done, it's written in the script like it's a play, like a Glengarry Glen Ross, and then like made into a screenplay, kind of. It was a screenplay written like a stage play. And you could do a stage production.
You absolutely could, but just like, again, just to lay my cards on the table, I don't find most of those modern comedies even a little bit funny.
Yeah.
Like as in, I'll watch them, I'm getting the jokes.
You don't like Kevin Hart, no?
I don't even mean that level of it. I mean, your Seth Rogen movies, or your Judd Apatow movies, of which there are many, and they're well written, and the characters are great, and they're well made.
It's almost the same film again.
I just don't
like the 40-Year-Old Virgin. Steve Carell, man.
There's a broadness to the humor that I just. It's so detached from reality that I can't enjoy it, and it takes, like, a lot of Chris Morris's stuff, say in the 90s, was really weird and whatever and hilarious, but it takes a great gift that a lot of American comedy writers do not have. This is a much more British style of humor.
It does feel like it.
It's much more, even though the people are saying stuff that no one of that age would ever say, the humor is from real humans in real situations, and nobody is doing something that you like. Why would you do that in that situation? Because it's funny, because it's going to make it more awkward. It's not contrived in that sense. And for me, watching, and it must be, other people must feel this as well, watching a lot of modern comedy movies, the more contrived it gets, the more I'm like, that's cool, but like I can't go with you on this adventure, you know?
Oh no, I get it. Like to watch the comedy movies that are not comedy, like comedy action movies, like The Other Guys or Pain and Gain and all of these things, they're funny in parts, or there's one like set piece. Like the last really funny movie that I've ever seen that has these set piece interactions, like Dumb and Dumber, was probably one of the funniest movies I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, and the way that's written,
or Me, Myself and Irene.
Also very good. Set pieces, like there's a beginning, middle, and end for each of the scenes. There's like teasers at the start that pay off at the end, and the way it's written. Whereas I think more of the comedy movies now, like I watched Get Hard with Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart, and that's just like goof after goof after goof.
Yeah,
where we haven't really learned about the character at all. It's just like, oh, it's Will Ferrell in a movie, so he just acts like Will Ferrell and or Ferrell, whichever one you want to do. And you're kind of presuming that that's the decisions that he's going to make, whereas letting the character, the script, or what happens to the character inform his decisions. So there is no emotional payoff. It's just watching him do funny, like clappy handsy, or it's like, here, fall over a thing.
Yeah, and those Farrelly Brothers movies, which came out of the Zucker and Zucker movies, always had really strong characterization. And you put this person, even something like Mr. Bean has this power. Like, here's his character, and I don't personally like it because he's too unbelievable. But you know what? You've set up that character. He does what he will do. It's not like, here's the part that here's the part that Chris Farley is playing, and you know what he's going to do or whatever.
But it's built on those comedy mechanics that like the likes of Del Close and these guys have built, like real comedy on. Loads of hit movies have been written on. SNL is based on it. I know SNL is not doing very well now, but it was like the pinnacle of comedy for so long, like the standard from when stars are born. And it's based on like hierarchy and status. It's based on these guys that have a very high hierarchy but a very low status. The Baldricks, where he's like, he could be even smarter than Blackadder, but his status is much, much lower. Or Blackadder is a perfect example of all of these. If anyone hasn't watched Blackadder, any of our American people, go watch that. That's a fucking perfect example of all of these comedy exercises. It's a master, servant, slave.
Don't watch the first series though. No, it's just not even the same show.
Blackadder the Third is probably the best one, or the World War One.
Yeah, what's Blackadder goes fourth.
Goes fourth. Yeah. So like a hierarchy of status. So like a maid who's like super sassy and wise, or the king who's like really bumbling and stupid. Like these are intrinsically funny characters because they don't. If you want to have a king who's also like a cunt and everybody does what he's told, it's not interesting. There's no room for change there. But a king who's very, very like high powered and respected, who's a bumbling fool, can become less respected and more normalized, but he can also become less foolish and come to an even balance. So there's room to move, and in that journey to the middle, that's where the comedy lives.
There's a great bit in this where Von Sloniker, the villain, is like, someone asks him, "Are you really a baron?" He's like, "You don't really care about that all that stuff, but of course I am."
Yeah.
And then he says it again. He's like, "Oh, it's the last ball of the season. You don't really care about that kind of stuff." And all he cares about is that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's the thing. He that farcical character of a hierarchy, like everyone's like, oh, there's a build up. So let's talk about Slick Rick then. There's a build up then of his character where our man Nick, who I think is supposed to be the star of the movie, Tom is like,
I think he steals the show. Tom is theoretically, Tom is the audience vehicle character. He's the one that brings you into this weird world, and he's a little bit different from them. He's a little bit more like us, even though he does live on the Upper East Side of New York. It's in a small apartment. Yeah,
it is, and he's from all right money that has come down to like okay money.
Yeah, his dad has left the city and cut him off, disinherited him. Oh, the heartbreak.
Because he was ginger. And so Tom Townsend, played by Edward Clements, who only made one more movie after this.
Yeah. And very few of these people went on to any kind of success, which
Edward
is really
Clements
sad.
went off to be a born-again Christian pastor. And he's been a pastor for years.
Very believable.
Very much so. In fact, Stillman had written him in as a character who would be around the parties just like quoting Bible verse and stuff like that, who would be totally asexual. And Tom was like, nah, man, it's too on the nose. So Tom, is the audience vehicle, audience point of view. And then our boy Nick, who seems to be like the cool one of the gang, but also he's like riddled with self-doubt. He's ultra rich but has no fulfillment in his life really, and he's trying to cement himself as the true leader of the gang. The fact that he's in a feud already with Rick before the movie starts is only shown when Rick turns up to a party with a date, and people are all like, who's that guy? So Nick, in order to tear Rick down in the eyes of everybody in the group, because everyone thinks like, oh, he's so cool, look at him, looks like a bad guy in a Steven Seagal movie. And he goes, yeah, well, look, you don't know the full story. I mean, you don't know what I know about him. And everyone's like, what is it, Nick? And he's like, well, apparently, like, he was fucking this girl and then he just left her off and she was trying to get in contact with him and he wouldn't. And then he said, okay, come on back. And him and his mates, like, pulled a train, which
he has to explain to
the
all
girls.
The boys and girls.
Yeah, Audrey doesn't really know. We would call it running a train, I guess. And it's basically just like, Everybody has a go, and
Pyramid of Xanthar.
Yeah, everybody finger cuffs, and everybody ends up, having a good time, except for the girl Polly Perkins, who got horrifically depressed, and according to Nick's depiction of the story, wouldn't wash for days, and was hanging around street corners and stuff like that. And eventually, she went out to a house out in the country to recuperate, and they found her hanging from the barn. She killed herself, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, shocking!"
Yeah, I just realised that this movie and Chasing Amy, the Kevin Smith movie, both have a plot point that's the crux around running a train.
I think it was a thing in the early 90s.
People
were into it, yeah. So I mean, like the whole group kind of turns on Rick, and this comes back on Nick later on, where Rick comes in and goes, "What did you fucking say about me?" And the whole thing is shown to be untrue. He tells Tom on the walk home, "Was like, no, I made up Polly Perkins," but like he does that shit to people, and I just need people to know. Yeah. But it's not like So you think, Nick is he's a little bit like disingenuous. He's a little bit of a fabricator. He tells a false story about Rick just to get people to hate him because he hates him, and we're left thinking that for almost the entire movie. He goes, that Polly Perkins is a composite of a load of stories I heard about what Rick does to girls. When confronted in the room, and this is part of the only action scene in the whole film, when confronted, Rick and Cynthia come back to the party, and we'll talk about Cynthia and Tom now in a second, and it's the final party of the season. Everybody's into this thing and they're watching the debutante ball on the TV. And, Rick is asked to see, are you really a baron? I don't want to talk about it. Basically, like, everyone's going, yeah, I don't know, man, Rick is here. Don't know if he can stay like this, fucking weird. You're awkward. And Nick is like, yeah, fuck that guy. Rick finds out that Nick has been talking about him and goes, hey, what the fuck have you been saying about me? Saying that I'm,
I love how you're transferring this into into ghetto style dialogue when it's the most erudite, it is. Champagne swilling, ridiculous dialogue.
You have to watch it. It's really, it's interesting to see a fight play out with such marble-mouthed magnificence. And he goes, what the fuck are you saying about me? And Nick is just like, yeah, well, you did do it though, didn't you though? And, Nick denies till you die. And basically, Nick goes, okay, well, look, do you want to tell the real story? How about Kathy Livingstone? and he drops this name, and some of the other guys in the apartment who arrived with Rick all get wide-eyed and guilty looking. He basically says Kathy Livingstone is Polly Perkins, and she was the one who got a train ran on her by two guys in the room, and she got depressed, and then she ended up killing herself. And Rick starts making these excuses, going, yeah, well, she was disturbed anyway, and blah blah blah. Nick stands up to him, he gets a bop on the nose. The whole team turn against Nick, and the Rat Pack, as they were called, all kind of go, yeah, I don't know, you didn't act great there. You could have done that with a bit more class. And it just ends up being him being unfairly cast out of the high society group.
Oh, it's a great bit of dialogue. Can I go?
Yes, do please.
So this is just because we haven't given you any concrete examples in this dialogue. So when they confront each other, Nick and Baron Rick von Sloniger, is it true you're a baron? Well, I don't put much store on that kind of thing. But they have
don't put much store. It is very you, though, Gareth. This movie.
I love it. So Nick faces off against the evil Baron von Sloniger, and Baron von Sloniger says, "I don't let anyone say that kind of thing to my face. Before you complained that I said it behind your back. Now that it's to your face, frankly, how can you tell which is which?" he gets a box like
that drives him to physical violence. That incenses the Baron so much that he strikes Nick down.
He has this other line that I love. Right, Rick keeps a collection of panties of the girls he seduced. Oh, when they later kill themselves, do you do anything special to memorialize them?
It's
caustic.
It's biting.
Yeah,
it's really biting, but it's said with such joviality.
Yeah, it's not a bloodless movie. Like there is there's threesomes and there's villains and there's violence.
There's a lad they took mescaline. And then your man is sitting there going, in my head, holding his head. And then someone goes, what's he doing? And the other people are like, oh, he's making fun of this guy who took mescaline one time, and all he did was just hold his head and say that for hours. And then the girl who's on the ground, she's like, I think lighting candles or something like that. She goes, oh no, we actually did take mescaline. Yeah. And it's like a 2-minute scene where they're all sitting around in the house and your man is rolling around on the couch off his head, and she's like fucking making toys like a child. And it's like, no, we did take a load of mescaline. And then it just like fades out to black.
Yeah,
it's absolutely pointless. That scene is pointless.
It's wonderful. I went to college with, I have to say, I went to college with people like this. I was never in this group of dilettantes, but I knew people who were, and then occasionally they would do something like this. Like,
but it's faux dilettantery, though. It's not.
But it's always faux. It's always been throughout history. Somebody's starving on your doorstep and you're having the dinner party. There's always something imaginary about it, or you're upholding your status by showing how erudite you are.
Sure.
But there were people, and they would have these dinner parties with their tuxes and stuff, and then somebody would be in the back out of their head on yokes, because it exists in the real world. And I love that contradiction. It's just ridiculous.
There's some of the things in it I thought were like normalized them, and maybe it showed that humanistic side. Obviously, on my press play we like to nominate a best supporting role. My nomination is for Taylor Nichols, who played Charlie Black. So Charlie was like this grounding force that used to say the whole time, like, but what if we're all just like, what if we're all normal, or what if like we're the abnormal ones and they're the cool ones, or what if like this can't last forever, right? I mean, we're really rich and everything's going great, like that can't be forever, right? Like, it's just so pessimistic. And also
he's
he
the
has
traditional nice guy as well, carrying the flame for the sweet Audrey
and blue pilling and all this cuckoldery. Like he basically, there's like love triangles going on as well, where Tom loves Cynthia's going out with Rick, Audrey loves Tom, and then Charlie loves Audrey. So it's like
Cynthia, who has an enormous number of boyfriends.
Yeah,
which I love that phrase. Just how many boyfriends does she have? An enormous number.
And as well, I think it's Sally and Nick end up getting together after spending the first half of the movie fighting, and Nick is like, you slut. And then later on we find out that they're riding, and then everyone goes, Nick, I thought you said she was a slut. And he's like, yes, but a beautiful slut. Like, I'm like, that is that. Mwah.
Later on in the movie, someone says about her, she's not inviting her to a party or something, and Nick proved that she was a slut. Someone says, well, that's not very fair, and the girl goes, well, I think it is.
Charlie says some really choice self-examinatory statements where he's just like, are we, this can't last forever, this hot
urban haute bourgeoisie.
Yeah, urban UHB, this urban haute bourgeoisie cannot last forever. I mean, we're a dying breed, and Reagan is mentioned a few times, and this kind of old New York swinging to new York. one of the funniest things, and this did make me actually chuckle in like audibly chuckle. I wasn't like Gareth Stack rolling on the ground laughing, but I thought this was very funny where he says like, the lads are like, are we really that bad? And he turns to them incredulous and almost angry, and he says, our generation is the worst since the Reformation. And then they look in through a window of like suits or whatever, and they're looking at each other, and Charlie's like, are you serious? Our generation is the worst since the Protestant Reformation. Oh, look, in this store they have detachable collars. Like, talking about shopping for a tux for Tom. You're like, what the fuck? It's very, like, oddly placed, those kind of
my favourite line from Nick, who's this kind of witty, well, I guess you could say closeted. He's very obviously a Wildian character, witty guy, and he calls von Sloniger, who is actually a baron, he goes riff raff, and someone says, well, he's hardly that, and he goes, oh, you mean because of his title we're supposed to be impressed by that? On the contrary, the titled aristocracy are the scum of the earth. Because he's the untitled aristocracy.
We're the untitled aristocracy.
Brilliant.
Or he says something like, Charlie also says something like, I don't read novels. I don't like to read novels. And everyone's like, but you're so well read. He's like, yes, I read literary criticism. Otherwise, you're just listening to some stuff an author made up. I'm like,
I get both the critic's opinion and the contents of the novel.
That's amazing. Like, that's an amazing way to look at literature. He's like, oh, I couldn't be bothered like losing myself in another world and using my imagination. I need my literature to mean something so that I can say it in a room full of people. It just seems like all this layers and layers of duplicity that they've lived their whole lives in, I guess, is just coming out in their 17, 18-year-old personalities. Now, Tom is the outsider, and he's the guy who's kind of a little bit poorer. There is like love triangle. I didn't feel that the love story in it, like the movie is supposed to hang on a love story or whatever, it didn't for this one.
This is a movie where the big culmination of the love story is them going, well, maybe I'll visit you in France. I don't think they even hold hands.
They don't even touch.
But it's so charming all the same, you know.
And I think it's more, when you're watching a movie like that, you're expecting, because I'm conditioned, I suppose, from normal cinema or cinema that you said that you wouldn't like. Like you're conditioned for these like payoffs, these like gratifying, you know, either visual or like tangible payoffs.
That would have been a whole different way to take the movie if they just banged in the last scene and it gets very graphic.
Just like hard, wet slapping.
Maybe in the remake.
It just seems like that they could have ended it a different way, like that they'd actually kissed, or that there was like, you know, some sort of a sexual release or whatever. It doesn't happen, and you're left kind of feeling a bit awkward, which is how those kids feel the whole time. So it's a perfect transition from screen to emotional weight. Like, it's perfectly done.
I can
but it's not satisfying, and that's why people might not like it.
I can say that as a film, it breaks, you know, every rule of building tension, then rewarding the audience. There's no arc, but it's not about that. And if you take it on its own terms, about these kind of sweet, awkward, like innocent characters who are completely out of time. Like, they get a taxi at one point and they don't know how to get a taxi.
Yes, they try to rent a car 3 times, and your man walks out of Hertz rental and he goes, I've never been refused by my mother's membership card before. And you're like, what? And then they go into like budget, and then they go into someplace else, and they're all like, how does one get around in New York? Like, it's so odd.
They get the taxi, and I swore we agreed on a price, and the taxi driver's like, fuck you, buddy.
He's like, what's this? What's this? I had thought we presumed 150 was quite enough for that journey.
There's a gratuity included.
It's so odd. It's like Coming to America or something like that, which I think was maybe a piss take of a movie like this. One of the sweetest moments, and this is one of my favorite moments in the whole film. It really shows how Tom is, but it also shows Nick's soft side, like as a contrast to his like brash public, bravado. He has a real childish side to him still, and he's only like 17 or something in this movie, supposed to be anyway. When they're walking home, he and Tom, and Nick is giving Tom advice about like, you have to be a little bit more aggressive and more assertive, and you got to fucking own this, because if you don't pretend like people won't think that you got to fucking man up or whatever. And in the middle of this, he abandons that to run over to a small box that's abandoned in front of this like shop front, and inside of it is like a child's toy train set. And he runs over and he goes like, "Oh my God, look, it's like from our childhood. Remember having those when we were young? Oh, those were simpler times." And he just goes off on this mad, nostalgia wank.
But did you get the other thing about that?
He goes and talks to his mother, and he asks his mother, and it's kind of like he wants to get closer to her.
No, that's not it. Those are actually Tom's toys. His dad's throwing them out.
Oh no,
because they're passing his dad's building, and his dad has literally threw his toys onto the street. And then you find out that his dad has moved to another city, and he's not even told him.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
So it's like heartbreaking. He's abandoned, you know.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of that in this. There's no parents.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah,
I was taking notes.
It's a very subtle move. There's no parents around it, and there's a lot of like abandonment. There's a lot of little hints that Nick goes off to meet his evil stepmother, and Audrey's like fleeing to France, and her parents don't know where she is the weekend. So there's sort of a little undercurrent of like they're all kind of abandoned. They're trying to make up life themselves.
They want to make a family amongst themselves, and there's a lot of talk about these people that you spend your time with are the people that you will spend your time with for the rest of your life.
But then they find out really quickly that they don't get to see that the girls kind of start coupling up with guys and start going on dates and breaking up the group dates, which is a very 50s America thing. At the end of the movie, the guys are just kind of left, these kind of
just three of them
dweeby guys, kind of like, and one of the guys has become an alcoholic and he has to cop out of the party, so they're just kind of left twiddling their thumbs.
I think that was Jane. They were going to a party in Jane's house that time, and it was like the last party of the season. I think it was the next year. It just flashes forward to at the very end, and nobody's around, and it's just Tom and Fred and Rick, which are the three lads that are left over. Like,
oh, this is all set at the same Christmas. Is it
the same? It's the last one of the season. Okay. Yeah. So like, but it's like the very, very last party or whatever. And Jane is like, "I'm off on a date."
Yeah.
And then they find out that Sally is going off on a date with the producer, who knows
Rick Van Slottick.
Yeah. And this producer is part of that thing, and I kind of got the vibe that she was like, "Yeah, I'm going to be singing in a music group that he's producing, but I have to go out tonight and suck his cock." Like, it was kind of inferred, right?
Watching it now that
really
knowing that they're all supposed to be 16, and she's with this sleazy ass older looking
kind
music
of
producer,
Weinstein-y in
a
his,
little bit Weinstein-y.
He actually looks like. He actually looks a bit like Weinstein. And there was kind of an insinuation that like, I'm going to have to suck cock, but I get to be real famous, so that's cool. And
this is a movie about they have a conversation at one point with this. They meet this older guy, this older preppy guy in a bar, and who's the character you keep bringing up? Charlie says to him, "Oh, we're so doomed."
Well,
and
that's the end. This is the end. That's the lovely, the beautiful payoff at the end is that they meet the old guy in the bar who is them from the future.
And one of the things the guy says is that, no, you have to admit that we're not all doomed. Some preppy rich people actually do. Of course, they all fucking succeed, but some of them manage to go and have meaningful lives.
But what succeed, you have to quantify what succeed means.
But the characters we're watching, the guys anyway, are the ones that don't. They're the future losers. Yeah, and that is one of the most charming things about it, because like as the girls are sort of becoming adults, and you know, even if it is kind of going off on dates or whatever, they're making their way in the world. The guys are still trying to sort of have this kind of, and it's one of those things that happens when you're a teenager. You have these teenage groups, and then everyone goes to college and they wander off, and you're sort of like, I thought you were my real friends.
It happens. It's happened to me. It's happened to you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but that's the thing, man. That's life. And I think the fact that we were following Tom's journey and we were kind of seeing it through his eyes, like if we were watching what was happening to Nick, I'm sure it'd be great. He'd be getting his dick sucked and going to college and, you know, getting away with a few sexual assaults and, you know, as those people are wont to do. But it just seems like
no, Nick's a skull and bones. Like Nick straight away, he's gonna
wanking in a coffin and tell his secrets. And
first day in college, he's gonna be
Lehman Brothers,
high-fiving George Bush Jr. and you know.
But he has that attitude and take no prisoners and kill the baby, you know, and then throw it out with the bathwater. He doesn't give a fuck, and he's telling everybody else like you have to not give a fuck. And yet when he sees a box of toy trains, he's like, "Ooh, trains!" Like, so it does show that he is being hardened.
And he helps Tom, poor Tommy. He gives him information about where to get a cheap tuxedo. They also sell them at a very reasonable price.
It's better to buy, Tom. and Tom is basically like, "Yes, all of what did he say?"
Is it the cheapest social life you'll find in New York? The booze is free, the dinners are free. All you need is a good tuxedo, 2 bow ties, 1 white, 1 black.
Yeah, but Tom has this word for like, it's one of your Gareth Stack words. It's like for expendable income.
When he keeps saying,
word? And he goes, "I haven't got much.
I've got limited resources."
Yes, something like that. But he says there's like a pertropicness. There's a word that I don't know. I'm just making it up. The word, but like he says this word, and he's like, my has been running low of late, and he's like, I can't afford to buy a tuxedo, but I'm also spending all the money on fucking renting these tuxedos because I'm out every weekend. Like I'm absolutely smashed. Yeah. It just seems so. It does like vacillate between like childish wonder and I think like pre-adult self-awareness.
Do you know what?
They don't know the way the world works, and yet they have to act like they do.
But it wasn't until I watched this. I've seen
it's
this
like
movie.
The Breakfast Club, but it's like in tuxedo. It's like the brunch club.
Oh, it's definitely the high tea club.
Yeah.
Right. Until I watched it this time, I didn't realize like how much I can kind of relate to this movie, because I went to a college where a lot of people were extremely privileged and wealthy, and I didn't have two beans. And I remember like there would constantly be tuxedo parties, and I wouldn't be able to go because I didn't have a tuxedo or could afford to rent
wear
one.
a tuxedo t-shirt.
Well, like, so like at Trinity, Trinity, they have the Trinity ball, but there's also all these other balls. There's a masked ball, and people have like, I don't know if they still do, but when I was in college, they would have parties like this, and you occasionally get invited, and you'd be like the weird poor people, that people would come over, and you'd be chatting to a girl, and then her friends would come and be like, he's not really wealthy enough to talk to.
They're the ones that you'd be invited to, and then they'd like see if they could play some kind of weird like social trick on you or something to get you to say a phrase, and then you say it, and everyone goes, "Hey!" because like they had made a bet before you came
Horse divorce.
Yeah. It seems. What's these petty pies? But it just seems. It seems that Tom was kind of on the outside and ended up being the moral fibre of the group after all.
The nice thing about this, the fantasy of this movie, is that
totally unsucked. Like he will not. Tom, the reason Tom will stay in the middle, or poor, is because he doesn't have that killer instinct. He won't go in for the shift with Audrey. He won't do anything. He won't, take the opportunity to.
If only he'd had you to go in for the shift.
I'm sure he had Nick to tell him, and he wasn't listening, man. Nick is like, you gotta fucks with that shit. Just take what you want, motherfucker. Like, just grab it. Oh, trains. Like, it was just a weird, flaccidity in his character that he just wouldn't just get the horn and fuck it. And he, like, if you don't do that, you will end up, not successful, sitting around lamenting your fucking.
Sure.
There's a weird scene where there's like a blue dream flash forward kind of a thing where Audrey, who is Tom's love, and this is kind of the crux of the movie. Audrey, who was played by Carolyn Farina, who was at the time a critic's darling, she was called.
It's weird that she's only ever been in other Whit Stilman movies, and I looked at her IMDb, and there's like one movie being made this year that she's going to be in, but she was really great in all those movies. She
said, when she was asked why we in no other movies, she said it's because I wasn't blonde.
If only someone had told her about hair dye, she would have changed her life.
Also, I think she wouldn't suck somebody's dick.
The grim,
which I think is I'm not blonde.
There's a grim reality about that. Like,
now we're seeing it though.
I'm sure lots of people who succeeded without that, but they probably were coming from Hollywood families or from some other access. Yeah, but she's so charming. She's
really charming,
really delightful.
She was called the modern day Audrey Hepburn at the time, and there was big hopes pinned on her future. Now, the story between her and Tom is that she went to Cynthia, who was Tom's previous beau or object of affection, and Tom had written all these beautiful.
Oh, it's Serena.
Is it Serena?
Cynthia
is with Nick
and a Serena
with Rick. Sorry. He's with Serena. He's in love with her, and he's sending her all these letters. And she kept them all, and at the end they were having the debrief you have when you're like, come here, listen, I fancied you for ages and I never got to fuck you, but I still have to have some kind of a closure, so I'm going to have this really awkward conversation with you where I tell you how I feel even though you don't care, but it's just for me and it's not for you, and you're a woman, so you're going to have to put up with it anyway.
I'm not angry with you,
otherwise
I just want you to know that if things had been different, I would be inside you.
He's saying like, if you had to let me fuck you, I totally would have, and this is going to save me 1,000 angry wanks.
But yeah, she
kept lets him down real nice, and it's just real, it's very amicable.
You took it that way, that she let him down. I think at the end they kind of get together.
No, with Serena, I'm saying.
Serena,
he's doing this breakup thing, and he's like, well, sure, listen, I wrote you all these letters, and she's like, I threw them all away. And he's like, well, I mean, if one was to put the effort into writing a letter, it's a personal communication. I would keep them. Any letters that I've been handwritten, I've kept them. And she's like, I didn't keep them. I wasn't bothered.
I didn't throw them away though. I gave them to this other chick.
But that's the thing. She goes, eventually she goes, okay, I didn't throw them away. And he's like, oh, what did you do with them? Oh, there was this girl that fancied you. She called her and she wanted them, so I just gave them to her. And he's like, you fucking what? He ended up giving him to Audrey, and through the whole movie you find out that Audrey's in love with Tom.
Which is such a sweet, like, it's weird
it's pure
twist,
innocent.
but it's like she's obviously an oddball, but it comes...
But from those letters, she fell in love with Tom before the movie even started in that timeline. Yeah. That's the whole point.
Which is so interesting, because it's I'm not sure if it necessarily makes sense when you watch the movie, because she doesn't really act like that at the beginning, doesn't seem to know who he is, but at the same time, it's a lovely little dalliance.
And it shows how the difference between how men view romance and sex and how women view romance and sex, where she's reading all those letters and building something up in her head about how Tom is, and going, yeah, and I'm in love with him, and
not all men, Gordo. No, there are some womany men like me who view it in the same way.
Well, I mean, you would view it in, not you personally, but like the Toms of the world are viewing it like, yeah, and all I have to do is just do this and then she'll touch it. Like, it's kind of like, there's a
oh, definitely not that.
There's a different, the way Tom and Nick and Rick and all of these guys are going, it's like, oh yeah, first you get the money, then you get the power, then you get the women. And it's, the women are like, first you get the letters, then you imagine what they're actually really like, and then you meet them, and your hopes and dreams are dashed, but you have to put up with it anyway because it's as good as you're going to get.
There's a weird thing. There's a line that Nick says about Von Slaniger. He says,
very cynical about love at Christmas time, but you know what I mean.
He says it's incredible the eagerness of girls like you to justify the worst bastards imaginable as being sensitive and shy. But if a guy was really shy dared talk to you, you wouldn't give him the time of day. Your eyes would glaze over. That's
the attitude that they have towards women, whereas the women have a different attitude towards the men. Like, they're calling the women like, oh, you slut, or you know, Sally is slapping Rick in the face for insulting her to her face, and then like 2 scenes later you find out that the 2 of them were having sex, like, and then she goes, I thought you said she was a slut. And he's like, yes, a beautiful slut. And she's like, well, I got the cock, so I don't care. Like, it's just not how you would imagine it to be. And there was a lot of different female characters there. Jane, like the dark haired one, Audrey, the critic's darling, the Audrey Hepburn style, like she all different characters of women were represented
as with Stillman's
men.
movies go on, they become much more about the women. So the first couple are very much focused on the male characters, but the later movies are
like The Last Days of Disco is like 2 girls
Last Days of Disco
being sexual beings,
damsels in distress,
and that's on my list after watching this now. Like, that's my first Stillman movie. Last Days of Disco is for my downtime, and I will be watching it.
It's good. Damsels in Distress, I think, is probably the best one. It's a musical, so if that puts you off, don't watch it.
I know I'm into musicals,
but
I'm good.
It's good. It's very like this film, very witty, very urbane, very slow paced. But it has the music kind of, and the cinematography is on a more adult level. Yeah, so they kind of make it more of a coherent film.
Stillman abandoned his copy of How to Direct a Movie for those ones, I guess. Right?
Yeah. I think his newest movie is pretty terrible though. He has a period drama which doesn't really do anything for me. But
great. No, it's just like the way this is just so innocent, and it's kind of a roll of the dice, and it is like Stillman's Clerks, because it's clunky and it has lots of like superfluous dialogue parts.
Yeah, it's Clerks without necrophilia.
Yeah, it's Clerks in posh upper Manhattan apartments that are worth 7 digits now at the moment. Like, it's very much an American Pie for that class of people.
It is like, this is a cliche, but it's one of those movies that is going to be very divisive. You could literally, and I've done this, watch it with someone, and I'd be laughing my head off, and they're just looking stony faced and awkward and shuffling their seat.
I wouldn't be laughing my head off now. Well, I wouldn't judge you, because some of the lines are funny.
They're very witty. Whether you like the kind of humor, you're going to know. If you like say Stephen Fry, if you like that kind of like his like The Liar, that kind of thing, The Hippopotamus, those kind of books. If you like wittiness, if you like your Jane Austen, then this is absolutely going to do it for you. Yeah. If you need more cinematography, if you need more action, otherwise a movie just gets dull for you, you absolutely will hate this film.
And like I said, first 20 minutes, just push past that first 20 minutes, and it starts to be like, it starts to unravel then. Do you know? It's a lubeless wheelchair accessible toilet ride for the first 15 minutes, because you're just like, this is not a thing I want. But eventually, 13 minutes and 45 seconds in, you get your first laugh, and you're like, oh, that's what this is. Promise you, 13 minutes 45 seconds. So what we like to do here on White Press Play is an alternative casting, and I understand, Gareth, you have some people. I also have some people.
I'd be interested to see who. I'd imagine we'll get at least one in common, maybe not.
We'll go with your best supporting first, and talk about who you liked as an actor, and then give us the alternative cast for that actor, and then we might do the rest of them. So who was your best supporting character. In
Well,
the
for
movie.
me, Chris Eigman actually takes it away as Nick
Nick,
Smith.
yeah,
just
yeah,
that bitter humor, that cynicism, that wittiness. He wears a top hat at one point.
He's an awful cunt, but he's lovable.
He's a lovable cunt,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Not, I think, to be fair, not unlike yourself.
A lovable cunt. I have been described as lovable, and I have been described as a cunt. Rarely two
Both.
in one.
To me, I think you are. Like, you stand by your morals, you speak your mind, you're honest to the point of insult, but you're pure of heart, and you don't have harm in your heart. And that's what I think Nick has. He doesn't know any better. Not that you don't know any better. I mean, he doesn't, because that's how he's been growing up. You make these decisions to live the life you live, and
Yeah, despite how ineffective it is.
brazenly. Like, not a lot of people would say, like, you know, some of the stuff that you say, or admit to some of the stuff you admit to, because they're like, oh no, that's not cool. Like, not that you're not cool.
I'm not even.
But you're not
I'm
even
wearing a teddy bear.
Yeah, but you don't try.
With,
it's a totally different thing,
apples.
you know. So, like, I think Nick is probably the closest, a mix between Nick and Tom.
I'd love to be Nick. I wouldn't want to be Tom. I think Tom goes on to a long and bitter life, probably in the priesthood, as he did in real life.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a soft side to you that I don't think you show to many people, and I've seen it on rare occasion over the last, I think, nearly 10 years. I know you. Yeah, Nick is. You're a nicer Nick. That's why I think you like him so much, because you're like, oh, I wish I could be that much of a cunt.
I wish I'd have the money to get away with that kind of life.
That's maybe the thing you're missing.
Yeah.
Is loads of money.
You know what? If anyone out there would like to adopt me, I'm a 37-year-old man, but you know, my parents didn't do
Like
the best
like
job.
a sugar poppy.
Well, you know, look, it's not going to be a sexual thing unless, you know, they're, you know,
The right money.
unless we're really talking real money. But I'll be a son to you. I'll make you proud.
Yeah.
I will have a yacht, and I'll do the Instagram pictures, all the things that your son would do.
I'm thinking that you are so abhorrent to the idea of being Tom, because it could have actually very much been part of your reality. You could have went down that.
If I'd managed to get in with these fucks.
That's what I mean. The ineffectual, the ineffectual religious hardline, you know,
Yeah.
apolitical, asocial youth. It could have happened if you didn't like break from that pupa of
Yeah.
wherever you were
Absolutely.
in. Yeah, I think Charlie Black is my one. Taylor Nichols, and his, and because I like him, because I identify with him too. He's the guy who's like not really sure of himself. He's not really sure of his station. He's questioning his existence, and I think if those guys were all smoking weed, that he would definitely be there. Like, guys, did you ever think that this is not a reality? Like, he's that dude, but in that setting. I think it's very, very funny. So
Well, you might like Barcelona, the kind of follow-up movie, because he's in that.
Oh, really?
He and Eichmann are both in it. They play
of their own characters.
you know, they're not the same characters, but they're basically the same
I
characters.
think, yeah, that's what it said about The Last Days of Disco, that Carolyn Farina reprises her role as like a grown-up Audrey, but she's called differently, and she's...
Well, she said no. She's actually Audrey.
Is she called
I think
Audrey,
she's
yeah?
the only one who's herself, but the other characters, some of the other actors play very similar characters.
Yeah.
I don't know why he bothered making them different, but
Is this like the Judd Apatow crowd that just never took off?
yeah,
Because like Seth Rogen and James Franco and Jason Segel were all in Freaks and Geeks together, and that was their first acting gig properly. Like, all of those guys all came up together and all supported each other.
Yeah.
And became like super successful and famous.
To be
this
fair to
crowd
them,
could have done that, but they just didn't.
Yeah, well, to be fair, like all the Seth Rogens, they were all brilliantly talented comedians and improvisers.
Yeah.
These guys weren't. These guys were first-time actors that lucked out. They were great in what they did, but it's not like they were the kind of broad-spectrum talent that could host Saturday Night Live or whatever, you know.
Right.
So those people, I don't necessarily like every Judd Apatow movie, but you can't deny the talent of the people he works with. Like, they're brilliant performers and consistent performers. So I think this crowd, I don't want to live in the universe where these guys become the Judd Apatows, because they're, you know, it would be it's a very sweet view of really atrocious social privilege.
Yeah.
And I have a fondness for that kind of fictional, warm-hearted view of what super wealthy people are like in their drawing rooms. But in reality, like, it's pretty horrible that the world has that kind of inequality. You know, we all got to be in the drawing room. It would be great.
And also,
but we don't.
Their reality is probably not as, you know, flamboyantly extravagant and, you know, enjoyable as it's projected on any of these movies and stuff. Like, they have no family life, they have no home life. These people are barely scrabbling on to keep these people around them as friends, because it's like, oh, we all know what it's like to be like rich but alone, and come on, let's all be alone together. And then they're all like, no, I'm going around being rich to be catching up on.
So this is a good double bill with Foxcatcher, if you want to see what it's really like at the top.
I've seen that with Steve Carell.
Oh, stunning film.
Is it rough?
It is bleak as bejesus.
Love it. I'll watch that.
And still not as bleak as The True Story, which is a documentary. I think it's on Netflix.
It's about like boarding school rugby.
No,
it's boat racing.
It's about a guy who's from an enormously wealthy, privileged background who is somehow mentally disabled in a way that no one's quite sure what's wrong with him, who takes over a wrestling team and makes them the All-American. He basically pays for them to go to the Olympics. Right. But he is homoerotically interested in the young wrestlers, and he is getting increasingly detached from reality. He has a fixation on guns, and he has them all living on his estate.
Is this the Steve Carell character?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And he is Steve Carell. I don't know if he got the Oscar for that, but he deserved it. He's incredible.
He's been knocking them out of the park recently. Yeah, fuck. I'm going to watch that.
That's another one. There's a recommendation.
A wrestling one. I knew it was something fancy. So yeah, this alternative cast. Then we get into it. For Nick, who did you have for your alternative cast for him?
Okay, so I think of the young generation of witty kind of urbane actors, there's only one that screams cunt but is possibly likable.
Go ahead.
Miles Teller.
Who's from the Drummond movie? What was that one called again? Whiplash. Yeah.
And he's in a bunch of movies.
Very good. Yeah. He's in one where he plays an arms dealer.
Yeah, with Jonah Hill.
Yeah. Very good. That's a good one. I had somebody who could be a dour cunt but also has like a comedy streak. Zach Braff.
Oh, he's so soft though.
Yeah, he is. But Nick is kind of soft too.
Nick is
he's
kind of soft.
Hard.
Maybe a very young Zach Braff.
Scrub Zach Braff. Pre directorial debut Zach Braff, when he still had hope and a twinkle in his eye, and reality hadn't caught up with him. I wonder will that come out about him like getting fiddled by somebody. He seems like someone who
oh my God,
could be a victim.
Let's not wish that on him.
I really don't. I really hope not. Seth Green also, I'm waiting for him to say something. There's a few heads I've been looking at going speculating, you know. Who else have we got then? So for Audrey, okay, the short-haired damsel, yes,
the sweet-natured, innocent Audrey, who's only ever been in love with one boy in my life.
The literal like quintessential debutante,
yes,
who is being introduced to groups of people of more than four for the first time, I think, in her life, and who is like, I'm in love and I don't know what to do with my vagina. Carolyn Farina, who was, you know, overlooked, I think, as an Audrey, the second Audrey Hepburn. Really good actress. Who did you have for her?
Carey Mulligan.
Who's Carey Mulligan?
Carey Mulligan is, I suppose, I know mostly from Shame. Let's do a quick IMDb on her. She's in numerous movies. She's a very successful. She's in Drive. She's the romantic lead in Drive. What else would be it? Never Let Me Go. If anyone's seen that movie,
she's got those like my eyes can tell a story eyes.
She has a sweet sadness to her.
Yeah,
and she's not like conventionally like red hot attractive, but she's beautiful.
Yeah,
and she has this an innocence balanced with kind of a slight, with intelligence and with a slight cynicism. I think she'd be perfect. Who did you have?
I had Molly Ringwald.
Oh, the actual Molly Ringwald.
Actual Molly Ringwald from the time.
instead of second rate Molly Ringwald.
Instead of just like monochrome Molly, just with black hair. She is very Molly Ringwald-esque.
She is
in her way. Farina was, and I think like after that 16 Candles, that whole John Hughes kind of era movies that she was in, she never really took off. She never really got into, she didn't transition like a lot of the other ones did, like Reese Witherspoon transitioned into stuff. And
Reese Witherspoon is transgender.
she transitioned from like a much younger kind of ditzy actress into like a producer, director, self-made woman, all this kind of stuff. Or other
I have so much
other actresses that there's somebody fall apart a little bit, like not fall apart. It's really bad to
there's
say,
someone
who
saw like a dark Hollywood childhood, like
fucked,
and amazing that she's like fucked. Still going and like
and doing it all for women, man. She's producing, she's buying all these spec scripts that are all like female centric. The first of which was that Walken movie. What was it called?
Oh, I've seen this. This movie.
What's it called? Walk? No, it's not called Walk. Run, Walk, Mountain. Stroll.
Wild.
Good man, Gareth.
There we go. I
Yes.
didn't even look it up.
She bought the spec script for that and made it and put herself in it, and that made enough money to make 2 more, and those 2 made enough to make 4 more, and so she has a lot of like female centric stuff coming out.
She's great. That's a really enjoyable movie.
She's brilliant, and she made the TV show Big Little Lies.
Okay,
That's
I haven't seen
really
that.
class. Stars Nicole Kidman as well. Whopper. 9 episodes of Fuck Your Mind Up. You can check it out on Netflix. Class shit. But Molly Ringwald didn't get that opportunity. She didn't get that, Julianne Moore transition from, beautiful young actress into talented, strong, confident, still beautiful older woman who's getting Oscars and shit. Like,
this is a
Molly
lesson for
Ringwald
actors.
just got dropped off. But
You got to take risks. Like Julianne Moore did Shortcuts with Robert Altman, and she did Full Frontal Nudity. I'm not saying that you got to do that, but you got to take a serious, hard role. When you're at your peak, you got to do what Ryan Gosling did and do a few like really edgy movies. You don't go straight from The Notebook to being a serious actor.
Lars and the Real Girl was the turning point for him. And even though it wasn't a commercial success or it wasn't actually like that famous, that was the thing that taught him the manners to go on.
He did
and do
Lars and the
rest.
Real Girl, but he also did another movie, Half Nelson.
Yeah, as well, yeah.
And Blue Valentine, of course. But those 3 are just killer young performances of like, here, this guy is going to go somewhere.
Blue Valentine, I think, was one of his best movies.
I think all 3 of those
Like he made it,
stunning films.
Absolutely.
Half Nelson, he's on crack the whole way through the movie, and he manages to be likable and also broken, and it's heart-rending.
It's almost a reprieve of that type of character in Only God Forgives as well. That kind of fucked up bro. And then Drive is so like super dark. Silent, super dark, broody. It's not about his sex, or it's not about The Notebook was kind of like the bean flicker. But Drive was like...
That was the original title for this show, right?
The Bean Flicker. Welcome to the Bean Flicker.
With me, the Bean.
Drive was one of those ones where fellas are like, is that your man off The Notebook? Wait a minute. What the fuck? Oh, look at that. Oh, that is cool. Like, it turned everybody on to the Ryan Gosling.
Bring me that Gosling.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for Tom then... Little simple Tom with the lining in his jacket, the previously rich boy living off ramen noodles and
you're gonna laugh.
Upper Manhattan.
I've actually written young Ryan Gosling.
Is it young Ryan? You fucker. I had this one is a joke and one is real. I had Seth Green.
Oh, that's perfect.
Because he's a little weirdy loser.
I haven't seen him in movies for so long it wouldn't occur to me, but Seth Green would be brilliant.
He has those qualities of like, I don't really believe in myself, but I really do.
Yes.
He was, and I had to look this up now to go into it. He's a Fourierist socialist, and that comes out in the first few minutes.
Yeah, which means he literally believes that people should live in a compound together in this like communist dictatorship.
Yeah. He's a collectivist. He's into collectivization, and he's like,
but he's like picked the most untrendy form of extreme communism just to have a little thing to talk about.
And everybody's like, are you really like that? And everything he does, they're all like, oh yeah, you're a Fourierist, all right. And it's just so funny how
there's a great
like, oh yeah, you're socialist, I'm actually a Fourierist. Like there's
a great callback to that where somebody says, oh, I remember you wrote a long letter to Serena about agrarian socialism. I think that was one of the things that set Alice Dreyer off about Marxism. Since then she's joined the Red Army underground. If she blows herself up, it's going to be your fault.
Yeah, that is so odd to come out with in the thing, like as a jeer, like, oh yeah, you think you're a socialist? Ooh. It's so obscure, and that was the only thing I went and looked up because I was like, that must be important, because there's like 60-70 seconds of dialogue about it. I hadn't got a notion what a Fourierist was.
No, I had to, when I saw this movie, I had to look it up and come across it then later, and you're like, that's what
it's nice. It's nice. So I had, my real choice is a young Tom Lennon who's in Reno 911. He has that awkward confidence. It's awkward confidence. It's like, I'll do it, but I'm not sure. And the character would perfectly fit the characters that he's played before. You can see it, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Like a gingery blondie Tom Lennon. So for Charlie, who's the self-examination, the self-examining, downward mobility fearmonger. Like he's the nerdy. Like, what about us? I really liked him. He's played by Taylor Nichols. Who did you have for him, or did you have anybody for him?
I didn't. You know what? I didn't have anybody, but I'm just going to go mad with this one. I play against type a young John Belushi.
Okay,
holding it back
like a very posh version of Animal House.
Yeah.
He's like the anarchist.
Animal Dollhouse.
Yeah, I'm going to drink a whole bottle of champagne all in one go. I had somebody like Michael Fassbender.
Huh.
Who could sit and wear the glass and just go, hey, you know what?
I'm just trying to imagine the movie that would contain all of the talent that we're pushing into it. It would be, I don't know what that movie would be like. I can't even.
Like an Ocean's 11.
Yeah.
But all in one room in New York. The Fassbender style, when I watched him in something like Frank, he's able to play that kind of a man unsure of himself. And also the fact that Charlie in this had like a longing for Audrey and tried to profess his love to her, and she's got very awkward and it's like, I walk away. There was that whole thing in Frank, and that, like, watching Frank really changed my opinion of Fassbender and what he could do. I thought he was just this, you know, good looking face, and he's just a name to throw onto stuff or whatever. Really talented dude. Like, I'd love to see more of him, and he'd definitely be a good Charlie. Throw some glasses on him and a little coif and he'd be away. So for the girls, I think they were kind of interchangeable to me, to be honest. Jane was the long dark haired,
she's a pretty blank canvas.
She is, but she's cynical, and she only becomes effective in the last third of the movie.
I will say, is a criticism of this movie is that you're not really sure what the relationships are between the characters. Yes. I'm still not sure if Jane is Nick's sister.
Yeah.
Or it's kind of not really explained.
You come in halfway through, and all good stories they start like a third of the way in anyway, you know. So,
but the women are underwritten. They're definitely Audrey
are.
is the only one that has a character really. Sally Fowler is meant to be just I guess.
No,
that's Cynthia.
Yeah,
see, that's how interchangeable they are.
Cynthia's the slut. I had Brittany Murphy.
Brittany Murphy, okay.
Because she's going out with who did you have for Nick again?
I had for Nick Miles Teller.
So Miles Taylor is going out with Brittany Murphy, and they kind of hate each other and they kind of like each other, and you know, you could see them ending up together. Yeah. The Brittany Murphy type that's in, you know, she has the attitude of this movie, but the actions of her character from 8 Mile or whatever.
I'd go Juno Temple for Cynthia.
Who's Juno Temple from?
So Juno Temple is in a ton of movies. She has a small role in The Dark Knight. I guess Horns would be her biggest role. Do you know that movie that was made from Stephen King's son's graphic novel?
Yes, with Daniel Radcliffe.
And she's the love interest. She's a really strange actress on screen, really. But she has that kind of very sexual nymphette, but also quite serious, but also quite demented. I think she'd be an amazing Cynthia.
Yeah, but you need a bit of demented for Cynthia. So Brittany Murphy. Jane is the long, dark-haired, kind of broody, cynical one. And she's the one at the end that kind of seals Nick's fate with the group. And she's also the one who tells the boys, like, have a nice night on your own, boys. I'm out on a date and just be out of the house by midnight. Like, it's kind of like, you three have nowhere else to go, so you can hang out in my house when I'm not there, but I'm not going to be there because I'm out having fun. You fucking losers. I think she only came into her own in the last act, and she could be very well played by Selma Blair, who is very similar in most of the characters that she plays, especially those characters of, like, you know, haughty upper class women who eventually turn into cunts very, very strongly towards the end of the movie. So, like, from Legally Blonde or from Cruel Intentions, she played that, you know, that cunty bitch who just held her lip until she could finally go, ha ha. There wasn't enough time in this movie for her to get her comeuppance, but I mean, that wasn't her function, I guess. And then we had Sally, who was, I think, very well represented by Dylan Hundley. We didn't see her in anything else.
No, never again.
But
she's sort of the queen bee.
Yeah,
it's the Sally Fowler Rat Pack. So presumably her family are the wealthiest and have the nicest apartment.
And I think she would have been very well replaced by, and we've talked about it before, but Reese Witherspoon. I have on the list. That's why I was talking about her so much. That she has that kind of, you know, I can take care of this. You know, I have it all under control. And come on now, guys. You know, she's very much the mother hen and very much a kind of an organizer, which Reese has about her, like about her character or whatever.
I went with Chloe Grace Moretz.
Yeah, that could be done as well. There's a few that could play her, like those strong female characters. It could be like even a young Meryl Streep from the movie with Dustin Hoffman. What's the name? Kramer versus Kramer that she's in.
Yeah.
Like that character of, like, I have it all done, and they're like just like button it all down, and it was like Kramer versus Kramer, like the teenage years before, you know, you got bitter and wanted a divorce and wanted to take
just
your husband
the love
for
story part of it.
Yeah, it's just you know, the fact that she knows her destiny and she's trying to go, like, look, I'm just out to have fun and I'm going to have as much fun as possible because I'm a serious woman. Reese kind of for me would encapsulate that, because you've seen that in real life. And then for Rick, the slick Rick, the sexy boy.
Oh, this is interesting now.
You know, a dirty pup who's out to
The wicked Von Slanica.
out to do it. So who would you have for slick Rick?
A young Jared Leto.
Very good. He would do that. I had Christian Bale.
Even better. You're good at this.
Yeah.
I would have to say all your picks are excellent.
I thought long and hard about it. Christian Bale could be an awful cunt.
Yeah, he really
and
could.
he was in a few different things.
And in real life, apparently.
But he...
allegedly.
No, not allegedly, just recording of it. Yeah. Shouting at fuckers. But I think he has that kind of like that slick back, like I can, I you know, he could pass for that
American
character.
Psycho. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
And Von Slanica presumably grew up to be.
I think it's a prequel. It could be a prequel to that. But yeah, that's the alternative casting for me. There's a couple others like Serena and Fred and stuff like that I think are just like bit parts. There was one dude, and he might as well have been wearing a lampshade for the whole fucking film. He'd come in and go, "Wait a minute, what's going on? Shut the fuck up, dude. Sit back in your chair. Get your money and fuck off." You know. But it was a terribly underfunded movie. I think very much underappreciated. And like I said, I think it is that first 15 minutes. Like, you know, you can only make a first impression once, and this movie doesn't make a good one. But Whit Stilman wrote a fucking whopper script. If you want to get, you know, some marble mounted, you know, soliloquy laden comedy, it is funny.
Yeah.
But it's not like, you know, if you're used to Dumb and Dumber, or if you're used to, you know, the Longest Yard, or some fucking Little Nicky or Big Daddy, or 50 First Dates or some bullshit.
It's neither is it. It's not like I kept mentioning Jane Austen, but it's not like a BBC adaptation of a Edwardian Victorian
it's natural
novel.
Language. It's all natural.
It's very
language.
natural, and it does have some dirty jokes, and it has some scandalous characters and stuff. It's very slow, but it's very witty. And again, if you like that kind of verbal humour, if you like characters just cutting each other down with their tongues,
you have to be tuned in though. It's not a movie you'd watch like while you're on your phone. You have to be watching.
Absolutely, yeah. It's
there's not that many visual cues that you would miss. There's not that many like it's not like watching, you know, like a thriller mystery where if you miss something visual, it'll tell you like, oh, the key is under the mat, or it's just like the mood will be broken in the first third of the movie, because it's like cut, and the way you know you're in a different room, they're all done visually, and it's not done by Stillman. It's done by the DOP, which is really, I think it's visual storytelling for as much of the story that he could tell, which is a really nice, like, you ever see that in a movie, I don't think, where the director doesn't have control over that. So it's like the real expression of the cameraman. I would definitely recommend this movie if we do a thing at White Press Play called One Reason Why. So if you're flicking through a Netflix queue, you come up on the cover of this and you're like, oh, this is a brilliant movie. The lads talked about this on the show. Let's give the people some ammunition to help their girlfriends or boyfriends understand why they should watch this movie. So Gareth, your one reason why we should watch this film, if we're to convince someone to watch it.
So in my imagination, you're sitting there on the couch, you know, you're a couple, maybe, you know, not to increase the strength of any gender norms, but maybe your girlfriend, maybe your boyfriend, maybe you got different tastes, maybe the guy likes comedy,
your weeaboo pillow,
maybe your fictional stuffed girlfriend, maybe the girl likes something that's more like Downton Abbey. Maybe this is a happy medium where it actually I'm trying to think why I think it's actually very funny, but it's also not it's not rooted in unreality or action, and it is a movie you have to actually watch. So maybe there's a middle ground. Maybe it's a good movie that a couple of friends that have differing tastes. Maybe it's the guy who likes the Downton Abbey. How about that? How about that world?
Equality
that doesn't exist. Yeah, but you know, maybe you got their, you know, differing tastes. Maybe it's the one you can settle on. Yeah, and I say that now. I love this movie. I'm not just trying to begrudgingly. I recommend it this
months ago.
This is one of my top 5 movies. I'm producing
this podcast like before we released even one episode, like in September, I think, of August this year. I'm producing it since like the end of 2015, trying to get everything ready for it. And the first thing that I asked Gareth was, he's like, oh, you got to have that movie.
And so my recommendation is kind of begrudging, not because I begrudge the movie, but because I'm aware that a lot of people will find it too slow. And if that's absolutely don't watch it if that's a problem.
It's not an insult to you. A little bit pretentious.
Oh, it's hella pretentious.
Like a little bit pretentious. And I was watching it going, what has this cunt after fucking making me? He's taking the piss out of him because he knew I had to watch the movie. He's like, I'll just waste 98 minutes of his time. Watch this. But it's actually brilliant and well heeled.
It is. It's a genuinely intellectual movie, and it's a movie that has a lot of humor about itself and about its characters, and it's not precious at all. The characters are pretentious. I think the location is pretentious, but the movie
is
itself
absolutely not. That's the thing. That's the thing I got from it. Where first impressions, you can only make first impression once. My one reason why would be you can watch something like Trading Places, or you can watch something like House of Cards and all this stuff, and see how like a higher
caliber of human.
Yes, absolutely, caliber of human would live. And I don't think it doesn't really. It looks into like most of that stuff leans into the stereotypes, because not a lot of people in that class would watch TV, right? Mm-hmm. And the people who would watch it are, laden with stereotypes about how those people act or talk or behave or whatever. And the whole kind of like, Mortimer, you want to make $1 to see if this black guy can do as well as Dan Aykroyd? Like, okay, cool. Like people, rich men play games and shit like that. It's like Twilight Zone, Rod Serling stuff. It's like, I'll make a bet that he can't keep his mouth shut for a year, and then he cuts his own vocal cords and it's all, this fucking bullshit. So, like, people have preconceived notions about how that class live. So
is that a real episode of the Twilight Zone?
Yeah, it is, yeah. He has to stay in a box and not talk for a year, and he gets $1 million because he's new money and he's not as rich as these guys are super rich.
Yeah. And
the old lad sits over to him and he goes, I'll give you $1 million if you shut the fuck up for a year. And he goes, I'll take that bet.
Does he have to be in a box as well?
Yeah, he stays in a box. And
I draw the line at the box.
I don't know. It's only the Twilight Zone. But for this movie, the one reason why is because I think this is so unique in its telling of the tale of teenage angst. And we've had our American Pie, and we've had our our Stand By Me, and our Stranger Things, and our teen adventure movies, a coming of age movies. This is a coming of age of a class that I don't think any of us have any real experience of, and if anybody has got experience of it, they're not watching this film. Do you know what I mean? And there's loads of stuff about like the lower class, and a lot of people taking advantage, and a lot of movies about like scumbags and chavs, and that whole chav class is, I think, almost been mined to death for TV shows and for stuff like that. The love hate and these kind of movie trailer park boys and all this kind of stuff, white trash movies and TV shows. This is a different class. It's the same story. It's a Stand By Me. It's an American Pie. It's a coming of age. It's like, how do I get to do the thing? And it shows a part of society that we wouldn't usually get to see in a funny way. That's funny to them. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of people, there's a lot of people that would watch American Pie and go, oh, dick jokes and fart jokes, and he rides his mother and he fucks a pie. Brilliant! But a lot of people from other parts of the world or from other like socioeconomic backgrounds would look at that and go, that's just puerile and bullshit, and I don't find that entertaining at all. Whereas like some witty, biting remarks like can really make you chuckle.
And there's something that we haven't said about this, which is that I think maybe part of the reason it wasn't as successful as it might have been is less because it's so slow and stuff. It's more because in the 90s, when this came out, the early 90s, people were really reacting against wealth and privilege. Yes. And
trickle down economics was not happening.
Yeah.
If it wasn't happening as promised, then people were pissed, man.
And this movie is reactionary. All of Whit Stillman's movies all come from a place of kind of wishing that the world still had essentially aristocrats wandering around being witty and whatever. You can enjoy this movie and for what it is and not agree with that. Like I definitely don't think that the world was a better place when people really, whenever in 1900 people really had conversations like this because they had literally had slaves and
but
shit.
It's also wishful self-criticism. It's going like, I know we're flawed, but isn't it better to have us?
That's the part that warms my heart about it, is that they're genuinely good-hearted people who are trying to have a sort of a classiness about them that isn't necessarily about money. Maybe it comes from because they have all this money, but the classiness that they're going for is more like being culturally interesting and being engaged. And anybody can do that. Anybody can read more and try and be a more interesting person and meet more interesting people. And there's something aspirational about that isn't about the money.
And this is the pre-Paris Hilton generation.
Yeah,
because I think if the representation of that class were this, a lot more people would have some respect for the 1% or whatever you would call that upper class, instead of this unilateral disdain for white people.
Well,
I'm not saying
you don't see the people who aren't like Paris Hilton on television, because they're not going to be Paris
exactly
Hilton, you know. And you know, one of the guy played Rick von Sloniger. I was looking at facts about him. He went to a school called the Dragon School.
Oh Christ!
Which is some ludicrous upper crust school in England
where Batman learned how to be Batman.
But like that, you know, there are lots of people like this who aren't all monsters, and maybe their privilege shouldn't exist, but it doesn't mean that there is nothing to be said for high class culture per se. We're
all people after all, folks. We're all people after all. So that's it for White Press Play for this time. That was Metropolitan, directed by Whit Stilman, from 1990. It is a movie I think you should watch. Like I said, first 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 seconds, you will get your first laugh and you will go, I'm in. Definitely go and watch it. And I put all the links for all the stuff that we talked about in the description, and you'll be able to go and find all of the alternative castings and the links to all the stuff that we talked about on the website as well, boypressplay.com. We're coming up to the Christmas season, so if you wanted to feel generous and drop $1 in our gilded Patreon bucket, it's patreon.com/ypressplay if you like the show. And if you wanted to get in touch with Gareth and tell him how great he is, or even argue with him about what he thinks about Europe, for the most part.
I shall fight you on the beaches.
At Gareth Stack on Twitter, and you can give him the shout out and share your recommendations for movies with him. You will be joining me again, Gareth, I do hope.
Oh God!
Don't sound so happy with it.
If I have to,
yeah, it's good crack, and it's good to talk about. It's good to talk about something like this with you, because you know, a lot of the time it's the same old stuff. This was something different for me,
and our next conversation will be about something altogether more different.
Yes, I await that. So if you want to get in touch with us at all, info@whitepressplay.com, and we're on all the social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Reddit, r/whitepressplay, and we're in a Discord. So come in and talk about this movie and what you think about it. If you thought it was shite, if you thought it was too slow, what you thought of the characters, and some of the assertions that we came to, which was, you know, it's not that bad to be rich, because you're still people. Do you know? They're rich. They still have the same problem. They still want you to put your dick in something. They still want people to love you and listen to when you talk, you know?
I suppose another way of thinking about it is, here, there's so much new money now. There's so many wealthy people.
Yeah.
Here's a movie teaching them how not to be cunts.
Yes. The not to be cunt school. Finishing school. For not cunts. That's what you need. So if you want to join in on the games front, we do have a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/ypressplay, and I'm going to be playing some PS4 games, some Steam games, and a bit of Nintendo and a bit of Mega Drive and stuff as well. So I'd just like to say thanks so much to one of our illustrious Patreon supporters and a friend of mine. I will count him as a friend, Jonathan. Happy birthday to you, buddy. He's having a good happy birthday there, and he sent me over a bunch of gifts for Christmas, which are much, much appreciated, including the Friday the 13th game, which I'm willing to play with anybody if they want to be the people that I chase around the forest and, you know, smash your chest into a spike in the garden or something like that. I'm more than willing to do that. A Dying Light, which I'll also be playing on Twitch, and some of the David Paulides books that's going to be on our Missing 411 episode. A lovely care package to get from the United States. So thanks very much, buddy, and happy birthday to you. So that's it for White Press Play for this time. Thanks for joining me, Gareth.
Thank you.
Is there anything you want to say to the folks before we go?
I'm glad you're still in Discord. I thought they kicked all the Nazis off.
Get out of here, Nazis! So that's it. Yeah, that's it for this time on White Press Play. My name's Gordon.
And my name's Gareth.
And we'll see you again next time. Goodbye.